Hi, my name is Shary Bartlett. I'm an artist based in Vancouver, Canada. Welcome to my studio. So today I'm going to tell you a little bit about the stories that are behind the sculptures that I'll be showing you how to make. I'm going to teach you two classes. One is called Hot Fabrication, which is how to use fabric and encaustic, and then the other one is called Spun Gold, which is how to use spun-bonded fibers and wax. And I'll tell you a little bit more about spun-bonded fibers and what they are.
I'm also going to share a third video with you called Bed of Roses, which is a fun project video that explores the amazing sculptural effects achieved when combining sweet-smelling encaustic beeswax with textiles.
But I also wanted to talk to you today about the materiality. So why did I choose certain fabrics, certain fibers to mix with the wax to really try to find their symbolic content to express further the ideas that I was trying to talk about with the work. So first of all, I wanted to talk about the power of story. And humans have always been storytellers, and we love stories because they help us to communicate. They teach us about history and human emotion and what it's like to be human. So as artists, we use visual storytelling as a way of communicating. So we use kind of a language like using color or texture or shape or scale, sometimes darkness and light. And that's the way that we really draw the viewer in aesthetically and intellectually. So sculpture is a fascinating way of telling stories because it really engages our tactile and our visual sensibilities. And unlike two-dimensional painting, the viewer is really asked to engage into the sculpture from all sides. We kind of look at it from up and down. We look at how the light reflects on it. We can look at the hollows and the voids on it. And so that really gives us that kind of language as a viewer. So a sculpture you may get a sense that it's very soft or it's hard. You just kind of get this emotional sense as you're looking at it. It may seem very flowing or kind of taut. It may seem kind of delicate or really aggressive or relaxed or dynamic. And in terms of the scale of a piece, if it's really big, it makes it feel sort of overwhelming, or it might be very tiny and you kind of engage in it in a very intimate kind of way. So the way that you build a sculpture really brings across that sensation and what you're going to interpret from it. And one of the things I love about encaustic is that it's very sensual. It smells beautiful, it feels beautiful, it looks beautiful the way that it reflects the light. And it just always still, after so many years of working with encaustic, it just makes me want to touch it and experience it sensually. So as I said, the material that we use to create a sculpture is really important. So obviously as encaustic artists, we use wax and we use resin as those sort of building blocks of encaustic medium. But encaustic is a fabulous material for building sculpture. And one of the things I do is that I work a lot with natural subject matter, human nature and environment and nature. So I really love using encaustic, and I love this sense of kind of energy that is built for me into the materiality of the wax. It's made by bees and by trees, obviously. The resin is what's used to make that medium. So it's sort of got that living energy into it. And I also love fabric. I love the way fabric looks when you hold it up in the light and how the light comes through it. I love how it moves and how it feels. So for me, combining wax and fabric is just like the perfect match. So in the last maybe 15 years or so, I've discovered what are called spun-bonded fibers. So they're these fibers that are like little threads that are just circling and circling all on top of each other, and they get almost like ironed flat. So when you hold them up to the light, you see all of these fibers spinning around, kind of like spun gold. And I love using those with encaustic because the two marry so well together. They're so absorbent, and that sense of light really comes through. And for me, I'm just passionate about how light works with both fiber and encaustic. I mentioned that nature is a common theme in my work. I love nature, and it just always seems to find its way into my work. And I love flowers, and you'll probably know that if you're familiar with the paintings that I make. But I have these mixed feelings about cut flowers. To me, they're really beautiful, but they have a sense of being cut off from their roots, from nature. And it got me thinking about the flower industry, the commercial flower industry, and how these flowers were grown. And the more I learned, I got more concerned about that, and I really wanted to express these mixed emotions of a sense of beauty and also worry about the effects of the commercial flower industry. So I wanted to express those concerns in the piece. So I specifically, in terms of materiality, I specifically chose to use synthetic polyester fabric to make my flowers out of wax. These are all dipped in wax and shaped using the wax, but I didn't want to use a natural material like silk. I wanted to really specifically highlight that unnaturalness of the flowers. And I also used pigment powder, kind of a gold pigment powder here, to represent the pesticides that are used with the flowers. So as you are aware, as an artist working with encaustic, the pesticides that are used for creating flowers, for example, commercial flowers, are really devastating for the bee populations, and that's had a great effect on the production of wax as well for us. And of course, the people that are administering these pesticides, and the whole ecosystem is affected by this commercial flower industry. So that's really what I was wanting to talk about in this piece. And I found it a little bit ironic that by forming these beautiful flowers and then covering them in wax and sort of imprisoning them into a box sealed by beeswax, that it was almost as if nature was trying to take over those unnatural, commercially grown flowers. The next story I wanted to tell you about is about this piece, which is called Daedalus's Gift. And it is a story for my life about parenting and struggling about letting my children grow up and become more independent. And it is modeled after the Greek mythical tale of Icarus. And you're probably familiar with the story of Icarus. You remember the young Icarus was trapped in the labyrinth with the Minotaur, and his father, Daedalus, built him a pair of wings made of wax and feathers. And that allowed him to escape from the labyrinth, but he was given one forewarning from his father, which was, when you go out, when you get free and you have you discover the whole world, be sure not to fly too close to the sun, because your feathers are held together with wax and string. So what happened? Of course, we all know Icarus, once he escaped, was so excited by everything out in the world and the beauty, and flew too close to the sun, and there was a rather unfortunate ending to Ovid's tale of Icarus. So I wanted to, I found that really related to what I was going through with my children at the time. My oldest boy was 16, and he was right on the verge of manhood, and tasting freedom and this whole new world out there for him. And being a mother that tends a little bit towards the worrisome, I was concerned about what might befall him. So I kind of worked those issues out by working with this story of Icarus and building this sculpture out of wax and feathers made of Lutradur, which is that spun-bonded fiber that I told you I was going to be teaching you how to use. So it really, for me, this spun bonded fiber was the perfect thing because it's very light and feather-like. Of course, the use of wax needs no explaining in the story, relating to the story. And so I love this Lutradur, and you'll see in the video that it does all kinds of amazing things. Another little fact about this piece is that I printed out Ovid's poem, which is how we know the story of Icarus. It was in a poem written by Ovid. So I ran the fabric, which I had rusted, and I'll explain that technique to you as well. I rusted the fabric, and then I ran it through the printer and printed the poem out. So if you were to look closely at it, you'd see that there are all of the words of this poem on the piece. So I also have a younger daughter, and I will show you another piece later. You can actually see it in behind me, and it's called Icarus's Sister. So I have a daughter who's younger. She was 14 at the time, and I knew more or less what I was going to be facing with her in a few years. So I thought, well, I wonder if Icarus had a sister. So I did a little bit of research, and I actually found out that there aren't a lot of women generally in Greek mythology. Certainly, I never found a sister. I did find in later editions of Ovid's tale that he had a mother and a brother, but no sister. So I made up a piece called Icarus's Sister. I invented her. I wanted to give her a wing as well that she could fly with. And so that's how those two pieces, that's the story behind those two pieces. So the last sculpture I wanted to talk to you about is part of an installation called Afterlife, and you can see a picture of it here. It's an installation that I made on Vancouver's Jericho Beach. I'm very fortunate to live close to the beach, and one of my favorite kind of creative places to walk is along the beach shore. I love this kind of liminal place between land and sea that is by the beach. And I find that all of my senses get engaged. I can breathe in the salty air, and I can hear the waves lapping up on the shore. And I love looking down at the sand to see what I can find. And I often find something that's very common on Vancouver beaches besides seaweed is beautiful shells. And this is actually a little mussel shell. So you can see the size of the mussel shell, quite tiny. And I find them so beautiful. They're very dull on the outside, but they're really beautiful on the inside. They have this kind of nacred interior, this shell-like interior. And I love the sort of jagged outside edge of them. So I decided to make this installation of oversized mussel shells. These are things that we just walk on along the beach, and they get crushed under our feet, and you don't pay any attention to them. So I wanted to make a big shell that would really draw people's attention. So as you see in the photo, I made a whole bunch of mussel shells for the beach, and made them the exterior very craggy and rough, and the interior very kind of pearlescent as well. And of course, this is made with beeswax and also with Tyvek, which is another one of those spun bonded fabrics. I love the symbolism that is inherent in this concave vessel, if you will, of this sculpture. It kind of has a sense of openness and receptivity, and historically mussels have been emblems of life associated with the feminine kind of uterus shape. And it has this kind of association with protecting life inside. And as I mentioned, I love how mussel shells, or shells in general, have this sense of ugliness and beauty. They are protecting something vulnerable. There's this kind of notion of life and death with them. And they're really kind of the mystical contradictions and realities of human nature. I had mentioned too that the materiality is really important to me. So the reason that I chose Tyvek, you might be familiar with Tyvek. It's this industrial spun bonded fiber, or paper really, that you've probably seen on office buildings or construction all the time. What it does, it's a breathable fabric that allows air to come in, but it doesn't allow the raindrops, for example, doesn't allow moisture to come in, but it will breathe. Tyvek is the perfect material to use to build these mussel shells because just like a mussel shell, it allows air to come in, it allows life to take place inside, but it has a kind of protecting quality as well. So you can see in this installation shot that I took the picture with my daughter on the beach, and I thought she was the perfect addition to this installation because just like a mussel shell or a home, I grew her inside my body. So I protected her when she was vulnerable, and I thought that that kind of made sense as a whole. And she also brings a sense of scale to the whole piece, so you can see how these shells are approximately about 20 times the size of the small original shells, what they really look like. So scale can make a really important statement as an artist, and I really wanted this sculptural installation to be this immersive experience. So this is a flower I made out of wax and Tyvek, kind of oversized flower. And this opportunity as artists to make something big reminds me of a quote by one of my favorite artists, Georgia O'Keeffe, who painted these really large-scale, beautiful paintings. And she said, "Nobody sees a flower, really. It's so small. We haven't time, and to see takes time." So I said to myself, I'll paint what I see, what the flower is to me, but I'll paint it big, and they will be surprised into taking time to look at it. I love that quote by her. So that's really the opportunity as an artist when you're building a sculpture, is you can make it big. So how do you build your own stories into a sculpture? So I usually start by thinking of an idea, and then I come up with a technical plan. And my technical plans, they never turn out as planned, but I do plan them in advance. And as you know, I like to think about what are the materials I'm going to use for building that sculpture. And I often do research on the materials, and that really helps me to understand the idea and get some new knowledge about shells, for example, or whatever the material is that I'm trying to build. And often that narrative of the story really comes to me as I'm making it, as I'm creating the sculpture. And I often follow up with contemplation and with writing. And when I was younger, I used to work a lot listening to music. And now when I work, I just simply work in silence often. That helps me to listen to my heart a little more closely. And I find that that narrative really comes to me, and it really helps to build that understanding and that communication and that expression through the sculptural piece that I'm working with. Art for me is a really important way to process my world, and it really helps me make connections and understand that experience of being human. I hope that this talk has given you a sense of the narrative behind the art and the techniques that I'm going to be exploring with you in my lessons on fiber arts and sculpture. And I'm really excited to see what you're going to come up with working with sculptures of your own. I would welcome you to check out my website to see more of my work. I have a couple of books where you can find my work. So you can find either of these books at your local public library probably, or the bookstore. You can find me on social media. I love Instagram, so you'll find me at Instagram at Shary Bartlett, or on Facebook, Shary Bartlett Artist. And I'm also on Pinterest. I also have a number of videos on YouTube where you can see my work, and both mixed media and encaustic. I'm honored to have 3 personally curated sets by Encausticos. These are 2 of them, a luminous and a vivid set of encaustic colors. And I also have an instructor set, so you can check those out with Encausticos. Feel free to send me an email if you have any questions or comments, or you're welcome to join my email list. And I'll see you in class. Bye.
If you'd like to learn more about other mixed media encaustic techniques, why not check out my other courses? Learn more on my website at www.sharybartlett.com.